Ladies and gentlemen, there are feelings that do not scream, yet they destroy. There are wounds that do not bleed, yet they ache deeper than anything visible. And there are loves that do not end with a fight, do not end with a goodbye, do not end with a final message or a dramatic last look. Some love simply fades into silence, but silence does not mean absence. Silence does not mean peace. Silence does not mean forgetting. Because somewhere in a quiet room, behind a calm face, in the middle of an ordinary night, someone is still thinking about you. Someone is still replaying your words. Someone is still remembering your voice. Someone is still noticing the empty space you left behind. Someone is still missing you, not loudly, not publicly, not in a way the world can see, but in the stillness where no one is watching, in silence. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the most painful truths of the human heart. What is hidden often lasts longer than what is spoken. We live in a world where people are taught to move on quickly, to look strong, to pretend they are unaffected. We are told to smile through heartbreak, to act normal through loneliness, to keep our dignity even when the soul is trembling. So many people become experts at silence. They stop sending messages. They stop asking questions. They stop reaching out. They stop saying, "I miss you." But just because the words stop, that does not mean the feeling has died. Sometimes the heart becomes quiet only because it is tired of being ignored. Sometimes the person who says nothing is the person who feels the most. Sometimes the one who appears cold is the one whose inner world is burning. And sometimes someone still misses you in silence because your presence once became a language their soul understood. Your laughter was not just sound to them. Your attention was not just attention. Your kindness was not just kindness. It was shelter. It was warmth. It was meaning. It was the kind of emotional home that the mind remembers long after the door has closed. This is the mystery of human connection. We think love is loud, but the deepest love is often quiet. We think memory fades with time, but the mind keeps the impressions of what touched the soul. We think people leave only when they walk away, but sometimes they stay inside us forever, even after they are gone from our lives. Carl Jung understood something profound about the human psyche. The outer world may change, but the inner world keeps its own truth. What we suppress does not disappear. It goes deeper. What we do not speak may return in dreams, in moods, in longing, in silence, in patterns we do not fully understand. A person can leave your life, but not your unconscious. They can disappear from your daily routine, but remain alive in the hidden chambers of your mind. And that is where missing becomes most dangerous, because it does not always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like quietness. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it looks like moving on, while still carrying an ache no one can see. Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever noticed how a person's memory can be stronger than a person's presence? You may forget what someone said on an ordinary afternoon, but you remember how they made you feel during one special moment. You may not recall every detail of their face, but you remember the feeling of safety, the spark in their eyes, the way your heart behaved when they were near. That is because the soul does not record life the same way the calendar does. The soul stores emotional truth, it stores impact, it stores attachment, it stores loss. And when someone misses you in silence, what they are really missing is not only your body, not only your voice, not only your replies. They are missing the version of themselves that existed when you were around. Because certain people do not just enter our lives, they enter our identity. They become a part of how we think, how we hope, how we trust, how we love. When they leave, a part of us leaves with them. And sometimes the missing is not about wanting the past back exactly as it was. Sometimes it is about wanting the feeling of being seen, chosen, and understood once again. Do you know why silence hurts more than rejection sometimes? Because rejection gives an ending. Silence gives uncertainty. Rejection says, "It is over." Silence says nothing. And because it says nothing, the mind keeps asking, "Did they forget me? Do they still think of me? Was I ever important? Did I matter at all? That is where the suffering deepens. The heart can survive truth more easily than ambiguity, but silence is ambiguity, dressed as distance. And yet, in that very silence, love often continues. There are people who never say a word, but they still check your profile. They still remember your birthday. They still hear a song and think of you. They still see a place and feel a sudden wave of the past. They still look at the stars and wonder if somewhere you are also looking up. They do not reach out because pride sits beside pain. They do not confess because time has made them cautious. They do not speak because they fear hearing a response that confirms what their heart already suspects, so they remain silent. But silence is not emptiness. Silence can be devotion with no voice. There is a special kind of grief that comes from loving someone who can no longer be reached. The days go on, the work gets done, the world keeps moving, yet the heart returns again and again to the same place. It returns to the memory, to the unfinished conversation, to the possibility that never became reality. It returns because the psyche does not always accept what life has forced upon it. The conscious mind may say, let it go, but the deeper self keeps holding on to the image, the hope, the feeling, the unfinished story. That is why some people still miss you in silence. Because they are not only missing a person, they are missing an unfinished meaning, and meaning is not easy to release. We often think the pain of being missed is flattering, but sometimes it is tragic, because it means there was a bond deep enough to leave a permanent shape in someone's inner world. It means the connection was not casual. It means the absence is still alive. It means that somewhere inside, they did not replace you. They adapted around the wound. That wound may look healed from the outside, but inside, it still speaks. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the hardest lessons in life is that not every missing will be announced. Not every wound will be explained. Not every love will be declared. Some people care in silence. Some people ache in silence. Some people cry in silence. Some people remember in silence. And some people spend months or years pretending they have moved on, while their inner world remains caught in the same emotional season. This is why understanding the human heart requires more than observation. It requires depth. It requires compassion. It requires the willingness to see beyond appearances. A person who laughs loudly may be carrying a deep loneliness. A person who posts cheerful pictures may be grieving privately. A person who seems detached may be protecting a fragile place within. And a person who never says, "I miss you," may be the one who misses you the most. The silence of missing is one of the quietest forms of suffering. Because when someone misses you openly, they risk being vulnerable. They risk not being answered. They risk exposing a heart that is still tender. But when someone misses you in silence, the pain becomes internal. It becomes a secret. It becomes a private room in the psyche, locked away, visited only in thought, in memory, in dream. They may smile around others, but alone they return to the same unspoken truth. Your absence still matters. And let us be honest, ladies and gentlemen, absence has a voice. It may not speak in words, but it speaks in atmosphere. A room feels different after someone special has left it. A day feels different after a message does not arrive. A routine feels different after a familiar presence disappears. Even if life continues, it continues around the whole. And the whole is felt most deeply in quiet moments. The late night, the early morning, the pause between tasks, the second when the mind has nothing to distract it and the heart remembers. That is why people miss more in silence than in noise. Noise gives distraction, silence gives truth, and truth can be unbearable when the heart is not ready for it. There are people who believe that if they never speak the longing will disappear. But the psyche is not so simple. What is denied often becomes stronger in the hidden self. The unconscious does not obey our pride. It does not care about appearances. It does not ask whether we are ready. It simply continues to preserve what mattered. It preserves the image of a person who made us feel alive. It preserves the emotional charge of unfinished love. It preserves the memory of being close and the pain of being far. So someone may sit in silence, but inside they are still having conversations with your memory. They may wonder what you would think if you saw them now. They may compare every new face to your presence. They may revisit every mistake they made. They may imagine what they should have said. They may regret what they never protected. They may grieve the version of the future that died when the connection ended. And all of this can happen while the outside world believes they are fine. This is the great illusion of human strength. People are often most broken where they appear most composed. But there is a deeper truth even than that. Missing someone in silence is not always about weakness. Sometimes it is about depth. Some hearts do not heal by erasing. They heal by understanding. They heal by feeling. They heal by accepting that some connections change us forever. A person can miss you and still not return. A person can love you and still remain distant. A person can keep your memory alive without ever sending a single message, and that can be painful, but it can also be meaningful, because it proves that some encounters matter beyond convenience, beyond time, beyond visibility. Ladies and gentlemen, every human being carries invisible rooms inside them. Some rooms are bright, some are abandoned, some are filled with laughter, some are filled with regret. And in some rooms the memory of one person keeps living long after the relationship has ended. That room may be untouched for months, yet it is never empty. In it, your name still echoes, your face still appears, your voice still returns in quiet moments. That is not fantasy. That is how memory and emotion intertwine. That is how the soul keeps a record. And perhaps that is why people say certain names in silence, not because they expect an answer, but because saying the name is the only way to acknowledge the ache. It becomes a private ritual, a confession no one hears, a prayer disguised as memory. There is a heartbreaking dignity in that, the dignity of missing without demanding, the dignity of loving without chasing, the dignity of remembering without disturbing the world. But it is also a lonely dignity, because it asks the heart to carry what the tongue will not release. Carl Jung spoke of the need to confront the hidden self, the shadow, the parts of us we would rather not see. Missing someone in silence often belongs to that shadow. We show the world our controlled face, but in the shadow there is yearning. There is unfinished attachment. There is the childlike wish to be called back, chosen again, remembered without having to ask. There is the fear that perhaps the silence means we were never as significant as we believed. And there is the painful possibility that they miss us too, but not enough to cross the distance. That possibility can haunt a person because it leaves them suspended between hope and resignation, between longing and acceptance, between maybe they still care and maybe I should stop waiting. The psyche does not enjoy such suspension. It wants resolution, it wants closure. But life rarely provides perfect closure. More often it provides silence, and in silence we are forced to meet ourselves. That is the deeper gift hidden inside the pain. When someone still misses you in silence, the event is not only about them, it is also about the mirror they hold up to your own soul. It asks, what did this connection awaken in you? What did you become because of it? What part of you was touched, opened, hurt, strengthened, or transformed? Because not every missed person returns, but every deeply felt relationship changes the one who remains. And maybe that is why your absence still lives in someone's inner world. Because you were not a passing moment. You were an experience that altered them. You were a chapter that did not end cleanly. You were the kind of presence that taught their heart to recognize something real. Even if life took you in different directions, the imprint remained. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not underestimate the power of an imprint. A hand leaves a mark in wet clay. Time hardens it, but does not remove it. In the same way, a genuine emotional connection leaves a trace in the psyche. The trace may not be visible to the world, but it remains. That is why certain names create a sudden silence in the body. That is why certain memories return with the force of a season. That is why certain songs feel like doors. They open the hidden room where the feeling still lives. And what feeling lives there most often? Missing. Not all missing is about romance. Sometimes we miss the one who saw us. Sometimes we miss the one who believed in us. Sometimes we miss the one who challenged us. Sometimes we miss the one who made life feel less heavy. Sometimes we miss the one who reminded us who we were before pain changed us. Sometimes we even miss the version of ourselves that existed when we were with them. Missing can be relational, but it can also be existential. It can be the grief of a self that no longer has the same shape. So when someone still misses you in silence, they may be missing the way you illuminated their world. They may be missing the stability your presence gave their nervous system. They may be missing the conversations that made time disappear. They may be missing the comfort of knowing someone understood their unspoken language. They may be missing the emotional geography of a bond that once felt safe, and they may not even know how to name it properly. They simply feel the ache and call it silence. This is why emotional truths are often simplest in private. Alone, the heart admits what the mouth refuses. Alone, the person who swore they were fine finally feels the weight of the loss. Alone, in the stillness of a room or the darkness of a night, the memory rises, not as a sentence, not as an argument, as a feeling, pure, raw, undeniable. And perhaps that is where your power lies, not in being remembered loudly, but in being impossible to forget quietly. That kind of impact is not ordinary. It means you touched something deeper than attraction. You touched meaning. You touched recognition. You touched a place in another human being where they felt seen. And once a person feels seen, they do not easily forget the one who looked at them that way. The eyes remember. The nervous system remembers. The heart remembers. The unconscious remembers. There are people who can lose possessions and recover from it easily. There are people who can lose opportunities and rebuild, but when they lose a person who became emotionally significant, the loss enters the architecture of the self. It changes how they trust, how they hope, how they attach, how they fear. That is why some missing lasts longer than the relationship itself. The relationship may have been brief, but the impact was deep, and deep things do not end quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, there is also a kind of shame people feel in missing someone. They think, I should be over this by now. They tell themselves, it should not still hurt. They compare their timeline to others and feel weak for still remembering. But the soul is not healed by pressure. The soul is healed by truth. If someone still misses you, they are not failing. They are human. They are carrying love, grief, memory, and attachment in the same chest. That is not weakness. That is the cost of having a heart that was real enough to be wounded. And let us be clear, silence does not prove indifference. Often, silence proves the opposite. Silence can be what remains when words are too dangerous, too fragile, or too late. Silence can be the graveyard of sentences never spoken. It can be the shelter for feelings too tender to expose. It can be the place where someone keeps your memory alive because speaking it would make the wound fresh again. How many people are silently carrying unfinished letters in their minds? How many are revisiting the last conversation, wishing they had been softer, wiser, braver? How many are wondering whether your life is easier without them, even while they still hope in some hidden way that you remember them too? The human heart is full of such contradictions. It wants closeness and fears rejection. It wants truth and fears loss. It wants to be chosen and fears becoming a burden. So it stays silent. Yet silence, again, is not the absence of feeling. It is often the shape feeling takes when it has nowhere safe to go. This is why some people return to memory instead of return to contact. Memory costs them less. Memory keeps the connection alive without risking the answer. In memory, they can still believe the bond was real. In memory, they can still hear the laughter, still replay the conversations, still imagine what your presence would feel like. Memory is both refuge and prison. It comforts, but it also keeps the door half open. And when the door stays half open, the heart does not fully rest. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps this speech is not only about someone missing you, perhaps it is also about the part of you that misses being missed. Because there is a subtle human hunger to matter so much that our absence becomes felt. Not to control someone, not to possess them, but to know that we left a mark, that our presence had meaning, that our time with them was not wasted. To be missed is to be acknowledged in absence. It is proof that one's existence once made a difference. But even that proof carries sorrow, because to be missed means something beautiful was lost. So we stand in this strange emotional space where sorrow and significance coexist. You are remembered, and that is beautiful. You are absent, and that is painful. Someone still thinks of you in silence, and that is a compliment to your impact, but also a testimony to unfinished longing. It tells us that human connection is rarely simple. It leaves echoes, it leaves traces, it leaves rooms in the mind that no new noise can fully erase. And maybe that is the real message behind the words, "Someone still misses you in silence." It is not merely a statement about another person. It is a reminder of how deeply we can live in one another's inner worlds without knowing it. We touch lives and move on, yet we remain. We leave, and yet we continue. We speak one season into another person's fate, and then wonder why they still hear us years later. That is because the psyche does not measure significance by duration alone. It measures significance by depth. A single honest moment can outlive 1,000 ordinary days. A single act of kindness can become a memory that survives a lifetime. A single gaze, a single conversation, a single goodbye can reshape the emotional world of another person. That is why we must be careful with hearts. That is why we must not treat connection lightly. That is why we must understand that what seems small to us may become enormous inside someone else, because someone may carry your presence long after you have forgotten the exact date, the exact place, the exact words. For them, it was not small. For them, it mattered. And because it mattered, it remains. Ladies and gentlemen, let us speak honestly about longing. Longing is not always a weakness. It is proof that the heart is still alive enough to remember what gave it meaning. A deadened heart does not miss. A hardened heart does not ache. A purely defended heart may survive, but it does not fully live. To miss someone is to admit that you were open, you were touched, you were changed. The world got inside you, and now part of that world has gone. And when it leaves, the silence it creates becomes a kind of echo chamber. Every thought bounces off the memory. Every quiet moment returns to the same image. Every night becomes a meeting place for what was lost. That is why sleep can feel difficult for a grieving heart. Night removes distraction and gives the unconscious room to speak. Dreams bring the unfinished to the surface. The mind replays what the day suppressed. And in that late darkness, the person who never says a word in daylight finally admits, if only to themselves, "I still miss them." This confession is not failure. It is honesty. And honesty is where healing begins. Because healing does not begin when memory is erased. Healing begins when memory is no longer denied. A person cannot heal what they refuse to name. They cannot release what they insist is already gone if their heart still carries it. They cannot build peace on the foundation of a lie. So the first step is truth. Yes, I miss. Yes, it hurts. Yes, the silence is loud. Yes, the absence still matters. Yes, I was changed by this person. Yes, the wound is real. Only then can the heart begin its slow work of integration. Integration is not forgetting. It is learning to hold the memory without being destroyed by it. It is allowing the past to exist without letting it govern the future. It is recognizing that a meaningful connection can end and still remain part of you in a healthy way. It is understanding that being missed by someone in silence does not mean your life must pause. It means your life touched another life deeply enough to echo. That echo may stay, but you do not have to live inside it forever. Still, the fact remains, someone misses you. Someone may be sitting in a place you once knew, thinking of a version of you that only exists in memory now. Someone may be hearing your favorite song and feeling the old ache return. Someone may be looking at the night sky and speaking your name without sound. Someone may be pretending to be strong while carrying your absence like a hidden stone. Someone may be smiling in the presence of others and breaking apart in private. Someone may be missing the way you made them feel seen, safe, alive, and understood. And perhaps the most beautiful, painful, and human thing about all of this is that they may never tell you. They may never send the message. They may never admit the truth. They may never risk the vulnerability. They may remain in silence forever. And still, the missing will continue. That is the tragedy of unspoken love. It survives in the inner world but cannot find a voice. It becomes a quiet companion. It sits beside the person during long nights. It walks with them through ordinary days. It rises in the gaps between tasks. It softens and sharpens depending on memory. But it never fully leaves. It is the hidden gravity of the heart. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have ever been missed in silence, then understand this. Your presence mattered more than you knew. You were not invisible. You were not forgettable. You were not easily replaced in the soul of the one who still remembers. And if you are the one doing the missing, then understand this too. Your silence does not make your feelings